You know, there's a hidden architecture that quietly governs your life, a kind of silent blueprint that doesn't determine what you want to do, but what you ultimately will do. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and explore that blueprint. Let's start with a mind-bending idea from physics. It's a proven fact that due to gravitational time dilation, time itself actually bends. The stronger the pull of gravity, the slower time moves. It means an astronaut in orbit ages just a tiny fraction slower than we do down here on Earth. It's a wild but very real concept. Now, what if that same slowing down effect isn't coming from some cosmic force, but from an internal friction you can't quite put your finger on? What if the reason the hours, days, and years feel stuck is because of a battle being waged entirely inside your own mind? Okay, so let's get into this. A lot of us feel this sense of being stuck in a loop. And our first instinct is often to blame ourselves, right? To see it as a lack of discipline or a personal failing. But what if it isn't a moral problem at all? What if it's just a predictable glitch in our operating system? Think about it. The mindless scrolling, that feeling of being totally drained after being on social media, making the same mistake over and over again, these aren't separate issues. They're actually symptoms. They're all clues pointing to one single underlying cause in your brain's wiring. The trick is to stop fighting the symptoms and start understanding the system itself. All right, let's decode that system. That feeling of being pulled in two different directions at once, it's not just in your head. Well, it is. But it's a real neurological tug-of-war happening between two very powerful and often competing parts of your brain. And we can actually give this internal struggle a name: limbic friction. It's the perfect term for that feeling of resistance you get when what you know you should be doing is in direct conflict with what you feel like doing right now. And this slide really breaks it down. On one side, you've got your prefrontal cortex. Think of it as the architect of your life. It's the part that plans, that thinks long-term, that makes rational decisions. But on the other side, you've got the limbic system, the reactor. It's ancient, it's powerful, and it cares about one thing: right now. It wants comfort, pleasure, and to avoid pain immediately. And that's the source of all the friction. So in this constant battle, the reactor often gets the win. And why is that? Well, our brains are fundamentally wired to conserve energy. They will almost always gravitate toward the path of least resistance. And this is exactly what modern addictive behaviors are built on. Social media, streaming services, they have been meticulously engineered to have absolutely zero friction. Taking that path of least resistance again and again builds a really powerful autopilot system. It means a huge part of your day is actually governed by habits that you're not even consciously aware of. Take a look at that number, 70%. Let that sink in for a second. That's how much of your day is estimated to be run by these unconscious habits. It's a pretty staggering figure when you think about how much of our lives are essentially on autopilot. Neuroscientists have a name for this. They call it automaticity. And it makes sense, right? Your brain automates common tasks to save precious mental energy. But the problem is when those frictionless, addictive behaviors are the ones that get automated. That's when you get trapped in a loop without even realizing you're in it. And here's the kicker. The neurological trap isn't even the video or the notification you're getting. Research shows that the real hook is what happens before you even click. Your brain releases a spike of dopamine not when you get the reward, but in anticipation of it, that little what-if moment. That's the fuel for limbic friction, and it's what gives your impulsive reactor brain the upper hand. This is how these habits get so good at bypassing your rational mind, the architect. They create what's called a closed loop, where one action just reflexively triggers the next. The scroll leads to the click, which leads to the next video, which leads to the next scroll. There's literally no space in that loop for your conscious planning brain to step in and say, hey, wait a minute. And look, this isn't some minor issue. As psychologists at Stanford have pointed out, this constant battle for our attention has created a modern epidemic. Distraction has become our default state, which means that true focus, that's become an act of rebellion. So how do you rebel? If being frictionless is the core of the problem, then the solution is to start thinking like an engineer. You have to consciously and deliberately reintroduce friction back into the system. But first, we have to completely discard the myth of willpower. Relying on sheer will is like trying to power a major city with one totally unreliable generator. It just doesn't work. Motivation is a fluctuating chemical state in your brain. It's not some constant character trait. We need a better system,
one that doesn't depend on how you feel at any given moment, but is actually built into your environment.
And that system is called friction theory. The goal is just to create small, deliberate obstacles that break that closed loop. Hiding an app in a folder introduces maybe a 2-second pause. That's just enough to break the muscle memory and force you to ask, do I really want to open this? Logging out after every use forces a tiny cost-benefit analysis. Disabling autoplay puts you back in charge. And searching for what you want instead of just browsing suggestions, that puts your rational architect brain back in the driver's seat. These aren't punishments, they're strategic interruptions.
But here's the thing, these external tactics are really just the beginning. The ultimate goal here isn't to just manage the system, but to begin upgrading it from the inside out, to truly become the architect of your own mind. And the most profound shift you can make is one of perspective. Stop looking at your unwanted habits as some sort of moral failure or a reflection of your character. Instead, try to view them with the detached curiosity of a computer programmer. See them for what they are, a bug in your code, a simple system error that can be analyzed, understood, and ultimately rewritten. So how do you rewrite the code? Well, here's a master strategy. Learn to work with your brain's natural daily rhythm, not against it. Your brain isn't the same machine at 9 a.m. as it is at 9 p.m. In phase 1, the first several hours you're awake, your brain is flooded with dopamine and norepinephrine. It's primed for focus, making it the perfect time for those difficult, high-friction tasks. In phase 2, as calming serotonin rises, you're better suited for easier habits. And phase 3, deep rest and sleep, is when the brain actually rewires and consolidates all those changes. Aligning your life to this rhythm is a game changer.
Now, one last thing to be aware of. As you start to really change your internal architecture, your external world might react in strange ways. You might experience something called identity stagnation, where people in your life are still relating to a version of you that doesn't really exist anymore. Try not to see this as a problem. See it as evidence of your own evolution. It's a natural side effect of growth.
Which brings us to the core of all this. The real goal was never just about changing a behavior. It's about fundamentally upgrading your identity. You're not just quitting a distraction. You're becoming the kind of person that an algorithm simply can't control. So, the blueprint is in your hands now. You understand the hidden forces of resistance, and you have the tools for reconstruction. The only question that's left is a deeply personal one. Who will you design yourself to be?